Welcome to Easily Entertained. My name is Bryson Olson, and here we talk about all the good things about entertainment. Today, as of this episode going out, December 3rd, is in fact my 24th birthday, and as such, I decided we're going to talk about one of my childhood favorites, Disney's Dinosaur, which conveniently was also released the exact same year that I was born, so that, it kind of works out. So anyways, let's get into it. So the story of Dinosaur is relatively simple, but there are ways they kind of spice it up a little bit to make it slightly interesting, but overall it's relatively straightforward. So the main story is this. An iguanodon egg off the mainland is snatched after a nasty run-in from a Carnotaurus, leading to a herd being dispersed and an egg being stolen and transferred all over the place. Eventually, after some sort of flying reptile, most likely a pteranodon, it's not really super clear what kind it is, but it is a flying reptile. It ends up falling onto an island. The island is inhabited only by lemurs, and they serve as kind of an adoptive family to this little iguanodon and name him Aladar. We cut forward a little bit in time, and Aladar is all grown up. He's a fully grown iguanodon. He's terrorizing no, I'm kidding. He is still fully family with all of them, and during this little mating ceremony, which kind of has some weird implications, like, yeah, let's watch all these little monkeys as they are very clearly looking to find someone to just make babies with. Anyways, though, during the ceremony, an asteroid, most likely the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, hits the Earth way off in the distance, and you see a massive explosion. It would have killed these guys, but it's a movie, so it's fine. So Aladar, along with his immediate family, they ditch the island and arrive on another mainland. And I really like this opening sequence. One, because the effects are really fun, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I also think it does a great job story-wise to establish the connection between Aladar and his family and the stakes that the story holds. The world has been thrown into this desolate wasteland, and they gotta make it out. They've been on this island for their entire lives. They haven't had to really fight a whole lot to survive, so they're gonna have to adapt a little bit, and that I find fantastic. I think that pushes the story a little bit more forward. So now they're on the mainland, and here they find this giant herd that's migrating. It's full of mixed dinosaurs, so it's like a whole bunch of different ones. And fun fact, that was actually like a real thing in history, where dinosaurs, like herds of different species, would come together. Not like they were intentionally together, more like because of space and similar migration patterns that they would just kind of follow each other. At least it's speculated, of course. But anyways, they have to make this huge journey across a desert, across this desolate wasteland, to make it to what they call the nesting grounds, a last hope for the world like it was before the asteroid. This is where we also see some of our supporting characters, with Baleen and Ema, a Brachiosaurus and Styracosaurus, respectively. And we also get our primary antagonist, I would say. Like, he is and he isn't. Crone, the leader of the herd. He's another iguanodon, but he hates Aladar. He does not like him, especially when he starts making little goo-goo eyes for his sister Nira after he stands up for the old people. And while that's great, they didn't really need to give him a love interest, but I guess in classic Disney fashion, we do got to give our main character a love interest. So while on the journey, we also encounter our secondary antagonist, the Carnotaurs, which I gotta say, they are so cool. They are the reason, this movie is the reason for Carnotaurus being one of my favorite dinosaurs. They caught me early on. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit as we get on to the dinosaur topic, but hold your horses a little bit. We got a few minutes before that. But we get some exciting face-offs with the Carnotaurs, seeing Aladar's courage to stand up for his friends, and you also see his leadership kind of develop as he gets the whole herd to stand as one and not scatter, making it easier for them to take on the Carnotaur. But eventually, though, everyone does make it to the nesting grounds. Yay, happy ending. Okay, the end. So a fairly simple story, sort of like one that we've seen from some other studio. While it isn't exactly The Land Before Time, I do find it kind of funny that both movies sort of have a similar premise, where the world starts ending, a little group of dinosaurs or dinosaur adjacent things all come together and they start making this little journey towards a hidden paradise. Sounds a little on the nose now. And they face a terrifying carnivorous dinosaur, make it despite the challenges. It all just seems maybe somewhat coincidental, or maybe Dinosaur was Disney's answer to Land Before Time. I don't think so. I don't think that's actually true. But I do feel like they may have taken some inspiration from the story of Land Before Time, at least in my opinion, because they are fairly similar, but they do have like quite a bit of different execution. But anyways, Dinosaur's case, though, for critics seem to be a little bit lackluster with their execution. And while I do love this movie, I sort of agree. Not in all things, but in particular, the character dynamics and their personalities are kind of meh, just because there's not a whole lot of growth between characters, like at all. Aladar, our main character, doesn't really have like an arc. He is pretty much the same character from the beginning as he is at the end. The side characters also kind of stay the same. No real growth kind of happens, which is kind of sucky, because I feel like this movie could have been even better with like some good growth. Like, I find it enjoyable, but there's not a whole lot of growth to the characters, which I think could have made up for it a little bit. But, well, it's not the worst thing. I do think this movie kind of makes up for it in some other areas. Okay, so let's talk about the dinosaurs. I have to. Whenever we have a movie that features dinosaurs, it's a have to. It's not a want, it's a need. I have to talk about the dinosaurs if they're in the movie. I can't not do it. Okay, as a huge dinosaur nerd, I have to talk about them. And for this one, I kind of got some mixed feelings, okay? And for some varying reasons on that as well. Goodness, I can't speak today. Overall, designs I do feel like are pretty well done. You don't get a whole ton of what is called shrink wrapping, and this happens a lot with dinosaur designs, especially during that 2000s period. It makes them very skinny, essentially just like skin and bones, and there's not a whole lot of muscle on them, which is not great, because, you know, they would have had muscle, they would have had fat, they would have had a whole lot more mass. Thankfully, this movie doesn't really have that all that much, which I think is great. Most of the designs are fairly good. My main gripe probably being that the iguanodons, like Aladar, Crone, Bruton, all of them, their teeth are so weird. And I don't think their teeth are like that in real life. Here's the thing, because iguanodon, like other duck-billed hadrosaurs, most likely would have had sort of this like beak where it was kind of like two plates going together. And they do have that for the iguanodons in this. However, they give them lips as to allow them to be more emotive. However, it looks really weird. I don't particularly love it. But overall, I feel like the design for them is pretty spot on. I also like some of the supporting characters' designs, like Ema, the Styracosaurus. Very much looks like the dinosaur, with a little of that kind of Disney flair to give her some character. Plus, I like that for her, she's supposed to be an old dinosaur, and they found a way to kind of add that sagging skin and an old feel to her design without making it too rubbery or unrealistic. Like, it kind of looks as if you found like an old lizard, essentially. I think that's kind of what it seems like to me, and I like that. My two biggest problems, though, with the dinosaurs in this movie is the selection as well as the sizes, both of which are off for specific things. And location technically, just because most of these dinosaurs were not going to live in the same area, so there's also that. But anyways, first let's talk about selection, which mainly contains one problem, being that of baleen. Baleen is a brachiosaurus which lives during the Jurassic period, whereas all the other dinosaurs in this movie take place at, as well as the time this movie takes place, is around the end of the Cretaceous, if we're assuming the meteor is the one that killed the dinosaurs, which would put the other dinosaurs about 80 million years after. So baleen should have been dead a long time ago. If age ain't killing her, then nothing will. She has nothing to worry about during this apocalypse. Second, we also have size. Most of the size comparisons with the other dinosaurs are not terrible. Like, the herd seems relatively right in comparison to each other. However, the size problem comes with our secondary antagonist, the Carnotaurs, which, first off, I also love their design. Their design is so cool. They are a little bit bulky for the species, as they would have been like slightly more slim. They would have been built more for speed, kind of like how we see in Prehistoric Planet. Fantastic documentary series if you haven't watched that. But I do like this one. I think it's fun, especially as kind of like a movie monster. It's very crocodilian, very fierce and sharp looking to really make him more menacing, and that I think it's a nice touch. I do like that. However, this Carnotaur is huge. Okay, he's absolutely massive. Okay, he's gigantic, which was not the case for Carnotaurs. Like they were big compared to us, but compared to all the hadrosaurs, they were not that big. In fact, Aladar, I believe, would have been bigger than the Carnotaurs. So these guys were huge. Okay, they were like T-Rex size. Absolutely gigantic. So that's my little gripe with them. And I know it's a movie, so I'm being slightly nitpicky, and yeah, I agree, I am just being nitpicky. I mainly include the nitpicky stuff just to kind of add a little bit of conflict, as to not always just be providing the usual glazing that I give. But overall, I don't really care all that much, but I do have to nitpick sometimes, especially as a dinosaur nerd. It's like I notice, and I don't care for the most part, but I do notice, and sometimes it does bug me. In this movie, it doesn't really bug me. But especially, though, what I like about the dinosaurs in this movie is the fact that for their antagonist, they didn't use T-Rex or raptors. Well, they did use raptors very briefly in this movie, but I like that they weren't the focus. The Carnotaurs were the focus, because it's always the T-Rex. And I'm like, well, the T-Rex is great, but I like that we add some more carnivores, because there are a lot of others. So that I find it great. Really, as long as you have a fun selection of dinosaurs in a movie, yeah, it's a win for me. So we talked about the dinosaur designs. I now want to talk about the execution of them and how well it held up, because not a lot of people know this, but most of the sets on this movie were real locations that they just added CGI dinosaurs into later. Most likely probably for cost reasons, because it was way back in 2000 and 90s when they were actually making the movie. CGI was not all the way there, and so to do all those really detailed backgrounds, that would have been so taxing. And there are some, but it's not a lot. They used mostly real locations, which I think is pretty freaking sick. Okay, I absolutely love that. But it's CGI dinosaurs on real locations. Anyways, but personally, I think that holds up really well. I like it. The CGI looks fairly detailed, and the lighting doesn't usually look out of place, which is usually a problem with that kind of early CGI type stuff. You kind of have to make things dark in order to hide it more, but I feel like they do pretty well in this. I remember as a kid absolutely just loving it. And you know, there's the story aspect as well, but I don't know how much I really cared about that rather than just the actual dinosaurs, because I could just picture those dinosaurs as being much closer to the real thing than if I were to just look at an illustration or another animated depiction of them, whereas they would be a little bit more cartoony. These ones felt realistic to them, and even now watching it again, I am like, damn, that actually kind of holds up for the most part. That's pretty good. I love it. It's awesome. And it reminds me a lot of the first Jurassic Park, just slightly more advanced, I think. I feel like the first Jurassic Park, like, they look so good, but some of the CGI models almost feel slightly rubbery, whereas this one, I feel like it's still pretty detailed, which I think is good. It's like they pushed those boundaries just a little bit further, and I think it holds up. I think especially compared to today's standards, it still looks pretty decent, at least in my opinion. The biggest part I think that doesn't hold up in terms of the effects and the CGI is the lemurs. Their fur looks fine and they are animated fairly decently most of the time, but I think where the problem comes in is with their facial expressions, especially when the camera is like right up in their face. Like if the camera is about this close to them, they look a little weird. Like the talking on the dinosaurs, I think is for the most part fine. Like just by their lips, which is kind of weird, but like a lot of dinosaurs had lips. The kinds that are in this movie didn't all have lips. But it does not bother me as much watching them talk, even though it's like technically same technology. But I think the lemurs are too alike in their facial structure as humans, which kind of starts to trail into that uncanny valley vibe almost. Overall though, I do feel like the CGI is not terrible. I think it's pretty good. And mixed with the practical effects they had as well, it was pretty ahead of its time. I think that's awesome. My favorite bit, like that I've seen in the behind the scenes, is the opening sequence that we talked about earlier when the asteroid hits, because they used like real explosions and the shots that they blended with the digital effects to make that whole scene like as intense as possible, and that I think just really worked out well, and I love it. And while as a kid I was definitely too young to consciously recognize all these little details, as a grown-up I love it. I think I can look back fondly on this movie with its fun dinosaurs, a decent enough story, and its exciting effects with a lot of enjoyment about it. You know, I loved watching it as a kid. It was always so much fun when I could watch it. It was a great time. And it's no wonder this one kind of became my go-to sleepover movie in my early years. So now let's talk about our rating. If you don't know our easily entertained rating scale, okay, if you're new, you better subscribe, okay, so you can know all about the scale. You would just know. Anyways, from least to best, it goes garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And I'm going to put this, as much as I love this movie, okay, I'm going to be realistic. I'm going to put Dinosaur in right mood, because I do kind of have to be in the right mood to watch this one. There are some other movies, there are a lot of other movies that I would probably watch way before this one, but it is a fond favorite that I look back on in my childhood, especially because I would always watch it during sleepovers, and we would immediately watch either before or after The Emperor's New Groove. It was so much fun. It was great, and I will be doing that one eventually as well. It'll be a great time, so you know, that's why you gotta stick around. But speaking of, you know, that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, give us a like and a subscribe so that you can be notified of all our new episodes every Tuesday. It's always a good time. And if you have any ideas on future things that you would like to hear me talk about, leave a comment down below. But until next time, bye!